We had an important presentation this morning about a resolution to long-standing issues with DNA testing in the city of Houston of sexual assault kits. Citizens know that we have had a backlog, a backlog that has grown over the years for decades of untested sexual assault kits. Now, there were valid law enforcement reasons why those kits were not tested. There were problems of cataloging and maintaining these kits that had been determined not to need to be tested. We've had difficulties really pinning down the scope of the problem. But a couple of things have happened over the last year. One is that the state legislature determined that if you do testing in a sexual assault case and you create a report and you create a kit, you must test that kit. Even if you determine that for whatever reason it's not necessary to test that kit for purposes of evidence. And so while we had always intended to move forward with the sexual assault kits we had in the so-called backlog, the change in state law put a fine point on that, and really it gave us no choice. However, we had already taken the steps to do the right thing and the appropriate thing for those women and men who had gone through the testing and whose kits had never, or gone through the creation of the sexual assault kits and whose kits had never been tested previously. We took to council as part of this current budget a request for up to $5 million to resolve this long-standing problem, and then we aggressively pursued the appropriate solution. We didn't want a fix, we didn't want to piecemeal it, we wanted a solution. We wanted the solution to be as cost-effective as possible, but once and for all, let's get rid of this issue and discussion of backlog DNA testing of sexual assault kits. The solution that we have brought forward is actually a really excellent solution. It allows us to take the backlog, allows us to take a current caseload, and allows our existing lab to get a little bit ahead of where it is as we go through the transition to an independent forensic center for Houston. But it does it in a very, very cost-effective manner. Because we have bundled so many cases together, we've given a tight time frame, we're using 2 vendors, we're able to get essentially volume pricing. 1/3 the cost of our normal DNA outsourcing. This will allow us to resolve the backlog, take care of existing cases that threaten to bog down as we try to juggle all the things that we're trying to do, and allows the new forensic center to move forward free of the burdens of the past. I'm very excited that we've gotten to this point today. This was a presentation to council. We will be going to council next week with those 2 contracts. As soon as those contracts get approved and signed, we will be into the full flow of work. And while we have given 12 to 14 months to complete the process, we believe that they're going to make great progress very early on, and I hope that we'll be able to bring it in a shorter time frame. It's the least we can do. Took a long time to get to this point. It's going to take us a little time to resolve the issue, but I want to salute the work of the Houston Police Department, particularly Chief Matt Slinkard and Executive Assistant Chief Tim Ottmeyer, for looking beyond where do we send our cases a few at a time to, is there a holistic solution that can not only resolve the problems of the past, but put us in a better position to face tomorrow. So I'm very excited about that. I want to thank Chairman Hochberg of the new LGC that will be eventually the Houston Independent Forensic Center. He's been involved in all of these discussions. He's got his new board up and functioning. I believe that they're in the process of finding an executive director of of the lab. But as I've said all along, what we are not dumping problems off onto this civilian board. We're taking care of our problems, and we're working hand in hand with this civilian board as they create a standalone independent forensic center that will serve our needs decades into the future. Where are you? Chairman Hochberg, you want to add anything about the process so far?
Well, this is exciting. Thank you, Mayor, for your support of this. Thanks to Chief McClelland and his staff. Been working with the department now for, I guess, about 6 months, and have had tremendous cooperation in all respects toward getting the new independent lab organization up and running. This presentation today will do 3 important things. First, it's a great deal for the taxpayers because of the volume that we're able to guarantee to these labs over a period of time, we're getting a great price, and that's important. Second, it's good for the independent lab because we're able to come in and know exactly what our target is. It's the target of handling the incoming cases that are coming in on a daily basis and keeping up with those and not allowing a backlog to occur. But most importantly, it's good for victims. You know, we talk about which cases get tested, which cases don't get tested. To me, the crucial decision is when that victim allows the invasive process of gathering that evidence to occur. And once that's happened, we need to do everything we can do to make sure that that evidence is tested and we get whatever information we can get out of that evidence. And with this contract in place, when the council puts it in place next week or the week after, we will get to a position where we can guarantee every victim that sexual assault evidence or other DNA evidence will be processed thoroughly and promptly. And that's a great victory for the City of Houston and for the Mayor and Council. So thank you for your help with that.
Can we get
questions?
the proper spelling of your name, please, sir, and your title?
First name Scott with 2 T's, last name Hoch, B as in boy, ERG. I'm the chair of the Houston Forensic Science Local Government Corporation.
Scott, will these testing be done in a timely manner and time for them to go to court so that these people who committed the rape be prosecuted? And what is the statute of limitation on the past rape kits that is more than 5 or 10 years old?
I'm going to pass that to Chief Slinkert because he's looked very specifically at that question.
And I'm going to answer it as well. There were law enforcement reasons why these cases were not tested. Those were laid out in the presentation to council. For most of these sexual assault kits, the case has been adjudicated in some way already. What we might hope for from the testing is that if in fact this was a serial rapist, if in fact this was a person who was involved in other types of crimes, once we upload it into CODIS, there'll be a hit. It is not anticipated that this will generate a huge volume of reopened cases. There may be some surprises there, but for the most part, these cases have been disposed of previously. And Chief Slinger, do you want to add anything to that?
To answer your question regarding statute of limitations, it depends on the case. There could be different facts in each case that would affect the statute of limitations, and if the tolling stops on a statute of limitation.
Chief, that 600 that 6,600 plus number, you arrived at that about a year ago. Have you ever been able to ascertain out of that 6,600 how many of those are dealing with truly open cases, not the ones that have been adjudicated, not the ones that it was either deemed consensual or other factors that the case is technically over and done with? Out of that 6,600 plus, how many of those are true active cases?
Those cases, that backlog of the 6,663 are the ones where no request from an investigator ever came forward. So those would be categorized as inactive cases. Now with the change in the statute, the fact that a report was made and evidence exists mandates that we go forward and we test those. So now if a result is received from the testing on that, then that could be a reactivated investigation.
So then technically it wasn't that it wasn't adjudicated, it was just there was no request from an investigator. Yeah.
And prior to the statute changing, that's part of the process. That's part of the investigative process, is when a request goes forward to a lab for testing. Now, with the change in the statute, it's required that it be submitted to an accredited lab.
There's been an implication that these kits were just ignored over the years, and that's been one of my frustrations, and I know it's been extremely painful to the police department to hear that. These were not, in any case, something that was ignored. There were, for whatever reasons of the investigation, the investigating officers did not request further for the testing. Maybe it was an issue of consent. You knew who the two parties were. Maybe it was an issue of there was other evidence, and we laid out some of those reasons. They've never been ignored, but we kept them stored in our property division. Now we have an opportunity to just completely clear the books. And I would also point out that DNA has progressed almost unimaginably in the years that we've been collecting these sexual assault kits. And there's a lot more information you can glean today than you could. So in one way, having these still on hand it's a financial issue. It's been a problem, and in most circumstances they would have been destroyed years ago. In another viewpoint, this is an opportunity to go back and find if there was anything there that was missed over the years.
If funds were available since last summer, if it was in the budget, why not move forward until now, particularly when you've been working with Sorensen for 3 years, I think it is, outsourcing cases to them already?
Okay, funds were put into the budget beginning in July as part of the current budget, but we still had to find labs with the capacity to handle the caseload. And we also had to figure out what is it that we wanted them to do. And by looking at this issue differently, combining it with active cases, really getting the volume up and driving the price down, and we set aside $5 million of tax revenue to try to deal with this issue. Now we're looking at a situation, because we've waited a few months and really drilled down, where we're spending $2.2 million in local tax dollars to take care of the issue. So we believe that the time has been well spent.
So practically speaking, when will this go in front of council to vote on it? So when will
it'll go? The two contracts will go next week.
And then when do you expect the backlog to be cleared in the best case scenario?
The contracts specify 12 to 14 months, but they're not going to hold them for 12 months. They're going to be doing initial screening. Some of them may not have any DNA to test. That means they're off the books. We go on down the road, and they're going to be returning them to us on an aggressive schedule. They're not interested in sitting on these cases.
This has been a bone of contention in months past relating to independent crime lab and things like that. Do you anticipate once this get cleared, maybe it'll help the whole county-city independent crime lab marriage thing down the road? Because it's been mentioned before as an issue by certain commissioners.
We have a really good working relationship with Harris County, and that working relationship continues to improve. This does remove one of the areas of debate. We began sending a trickle of DNA cases to Harris County, but that was all that they could handle. And then as part of their move, they indicated to us that they really couldn't handle those cases. And so by having a productive dialogue and actually now being able to come in and say, look, for 1/3 of the cost of what what the county can process these kits, we can outsource them. We can have a more productive conversation of what is the true cost of providing the service, who does it better, what can we share, what should we share, what makes sense for the taxpayers. And by having this data, it helps us move forward.
Chief Slinkard, I'm sorry, one last question about the 6,600. I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. You do not believe that any of those 6,600 kits are tied to any unsolved cases? You believe that in some form or fashion that the prosecution or request of dropping it, request of complaining with the 6,600? I'm trying to understand.
No, that's a different question. For example,
okay,
we are going to send forward kits for testing, like the mayor has stated, in cases that have, in some respects, been adjudicated.
Right.
Meaning there could have been other evidence in a case. There could have been a confession from a suspect. Somebody could have been arrested, charged, and actually convicted in a case where that testing did not take place. Or for whatever reason, because the details of the investigation, either the law enforcement investigation or the subsequent investigation by the district attorney's office, proved that the testing of the kit wasn't probative at the time. Now that issue does not matter. The statute requires that if we have it, it's going to go forward for testing. So some of those are going to already be adjudicated.
Some of those guys whose we collected this evidence for a particular case may be involved in other cases.
Right.
And so yes, it is possible. When you say, an unsolved case or an open case, not these cases, but it may link them to other cases, and that is what the hope is.
But if it wasn't for the state law, you probably wouldn't have tested a lot of these cases, because I guess at first blush in some of your investigations they weren't required or needed or asked for or whatever.
We have been dealing with this issue for some time. First it was, let's figure out what the problem is, then how do we solve it, and solving it required revenues. But then it actually became not a matter of law, but a matter of policy. And the state legislature actually took the policy decision. We were moving in this direction anyway. That's why we've been working to find the revenue to do this, but the legislature made the policy decision for us.
Mayor, I wonder,
Going on
some of
that
this, would any of some of these cases have already been adjudicated, as you point out? In your opinion, is any of this a waste of money?
That's the policy question. Councilmember Cohen actually expressed this very well today. The policy question is, once someone is raped, whether that is a woman, a child, a man, once someone is raped, and they come forward and say, I have been raped, and they put themselves through the collection of evidence for a sexual assault kit, is it important to determine, quite apart from that particular incident, if the person involved was potentially involved in other crimes? That is a political issue. It's a policy issue. It's an issue. It's a moral issue for a lot of people. What we're doing is we are going to test everything, and going forward, we are going to test everything. If you're willing to put yourself through the evidence collection, we have a responsibility to honor that decision.
Policy aside, the new state law aside, morality aside, just from a purely investigative standpoint, had there not been this new law passed, would there, from an investigative standpoint, be a need to test these 6,600?
If there had been an investigative need to test these, we would have tested them in the past.
Did you determine how many of them during the audit? I know that was part of it. You were trying to determine the circumstances in each case, because the databases have changed over time and because there were a lot of these issues. Exactly what had been submitted, what kind of evidence had been submitted, who had, if a witness had come, another witness had come forward, or if a
That's
victim
why
had
it took so long.
So were you able to determine and break those down into how many cases are each? Do you have that breakdown?
Well, I don't have that to recite to you right here, but part of our review, when we looked at the 6,663 that have been stored, and we say, what are we going to do, because resources may not be there to do everything when we started this endeavor. Now, luckily, with the support of the mayor and the administration, we've been able to come up with a plan that we can do this and do it all within the resources. But in the beginning, it takes a complete investigative review. That's requiring opening up nearly 7,000 different investigations to look at the case characteristics, to find out different things. Was the complainant an adult? Was the complainant a juvenile? Different things regarding the case. Why wasn't there a request for testing to begin with? What are the case specifics? Was it an issue of consent? Some of those things that we covered today in the presentation. Because without having a plan that we do now to be able to do everything, the entire volume of work, then the priority scheme is going to be very important. Meaning, with the limited amount of resources, what actually needs to go first that we can accomplish? So yes, we had to do a complete case review to break those things down.
And were you able to do that? You do have everything organized in a priority. You have it all broken down.
Yeah, there will be a priority as the cases get shipped out. Now, luckily, the vendors have expressed, their interest in wanting to get all of the work as soon as possible and up front. So we're happy about that, because the priority, if we were doing much smaller shipments, would be much more important because we would be wanting the more important cases or the cases that were crucial to go forward faster than the other ones.
So with that, I know I have a kind of a two-part question. I apologize. One, the property crime. One, as I understood it, I was wondering. I know you're sending property crime to these labs as well. When the Houston Police Department started collecting evidence, like touch DNA in property crime cases, because as I understand it, that Houston Police Department wasn't testing DNA in property crimes because there were other priority cases like homicides and sexual assault kits. Second, the statute of limitations is much more strict, where it's a little bit hazy and subjective, each case by case in sexual assaults. In property crimes, it's there are much more strict guidelines. So how far back do those property crime cases go?
Okay. The fact that the violent crime cases would come first doesn't mean that we want to prohibit or limit an investigator's response. If something has solvability factors, meaning at the scene of a property crime, and there is bodily fluid or some type of touch DNA to collect, then obviously we want the chance to solve that case at some point. So those cases being requested by investigators and that evidence being submitted to the lab has gone on and has taken place. But trying to test those property crimes is always going to come secondary to violent crimes against persons. So that's why we haven't gotten to the property crime list that we discussed today.
Scott?
How many cases you have? There is DNA to the property crime?
Like we talked about today, there was 1,020 of those that need to go forward that are your non-sexual assault related cases.
Is the new lab going to test for property crime now?
Right.
Will the new lab be testing for property crime as well?
We're going to test DNA when we have it, but we prioritize the cases. And so you're asking the wrong question. Yes, we're going to test DNA when we think it's going to be important to solving the case, but we're always going to work first from a priority of some kind of violent crime.
How far back does 1020 go?
We can get you that number. I don't have it with me, but
we're also going to be sending a significant volume of cases that are coming in the door while we've got this price. And there is a little bit of extra work on behalf of the current crime lab, because once this data comes back, they've got to work with the department, the investigators. They also have to be the ones to upload it into CODIS. And so while we're going through this transition, we are also going to be sending some of the current caseload to make sure we don't fall behind.
So is everything going to go into CODIS? I mean, everything with biological material present, is that just going to be?
Let me clarify one thing on the 1,020 before because I don't want to get that wrong. I want to make sure these numbers are very clear. Okay, there is property crime involved in that, but there also could be another violent offense like a robbery. It's something other than a sexual assault. Okay, now on the CODIS upload or CODIS entry, that is determined based on the results that we get after a test. Meaning, for a CODIS entry to happen, then you have to have a profile that meets certain standards that makes it eligible for upload to CODIS. And that CODIS upload has to be done by a law enforcement or government entity. So that's why these outside labs don't do the CODIS upload and CODIS entry.
But no, what I'm asking, when you do get back those that do meet that criteria for upload, will all those cases just automatically be uploaded into CODIS by HPD or? Yeah.
As cases come back and the technical review that's required is completed and it's eligible for a CODIS upload, then yes, it will go into CODIS.
Scott, there seems to be an insensitivity to the rape kits that are going to be tested. Because in this room, we have a majority of women. And if a woman's been raped, I don't think she cares about whether or not this guy broke into somebody else's house and robbed them and stuff like that. She wants to get her rape over with. She wants to get the person in jail for doing that. And it seems as though there's an insensitivity to that specific fact. Now, Mrs. Cohen, she expressed and put a face on this situation that hasn't been done for a while. Actual women have been raped. And women came to City Council several months ago and during the year in outrage because these rape kits had not been tested.
Tony, and I addressed this issue earlier, and I understand how wrenching it is, and I understand how emotional this is, and I guarantee you, for the women around this council table, it's a hugely personal issue. These kits were not ignored, and the perpetrators were not allowed to just walk away. There were various reasons why the kits were not tested originally. Public thinking has changed. Our public attitude about what we do with available DNA when it comes to law enforcement has changed, and that's really, it's changed the discussion. We have, I do think it is important to test these kids, to test all of them. I don't care, the police department will, but I don't care whether they're beyond the statute of limitations. We've made the decision, we're going forward, we're going to test it, and if we have the ability to load this, if we get data we can load into CODIS and find somebody that's still on the street, that will be money well spent. Now I want to move on to Hobby Airport, if there are questions. Thank you. Good job. Good presentation. Because I think most of y'all ran out and got these guys when they were out in the hall. Another big step forward in international flights coming to Hobby Airport. Unanimous approval today of the lease agreement with Southwest Airlines on the new international terminal. We're going to continue to have milestones moving forward. One of the things that everyone saw is that the price of this new terminal has gone up, and that price will be covered by Southwest Airlines. As we said from the beginning, this is Southwest working with us to create an international presence at Hobby Airport, but Southwest taking on the responsibility of creating a terminal that meets our standards, meets their standards at their cost. So we believe that this is another great step forward. Any questions?
Will they change the name of Hobby Airport to Hobby International or something like that?
When we get a little closer to the actual deal, we might very well consider that. That would be a decision for Houston City Council. But yes, I think it will make a statement, and we probably will consider that.
Mayor, the original projected cost was how much, and how much is it going to be now?
More in the range of $100 million, although those were rough estimates. Now it's about $150 million. And again, that cost will be borne by Southwest Airlines.
How did it go up so dramatically? We're talking, did steel get more expensive or what?
These are decisions about what kind of amenities they want in the terminal, and a realization on their part that they're building for the long term, and they want a quality product.
Mayor, what will the city do to ensure adequate customs staffing for Hobby, Bush, and the Port of Houston?
It is the federal government's responsibility to ensure adequate customs staffing. We would not do anything that would impede traffic in and out of Bush Intercontinental Airport. We certainly would not want to do anything that would impede the movement of cargo in the Port of Houston, but we absolutely believe that our federal regulators will recognize that this is a good economic decision for Houston and for the country and move forward. Clearly, Southwest Airlines would not be putting $150 million in play without an expectation that the Customs and Immigration Terminal would be, or facility would be adequately staffed.
Mayor, can you just say, quick question, sorry. City, big weekend, all-star game.
Big weekend, woohoo, yeah. That's what you asked your question? Okay, what do you want to know?
We saw you playing basketball clutch and whatever, but
yeah,
anyway, what
trying not to embarrass myself.
Expect this weekend? And, you know, obviously we've hosted an all-star game before. What are we ready for? You know, are you excited? All that stuff.
There are lots of affordable, fan-friendly things going on around town. I mean, most of us are not going to go to the game. Most of us are not going to go to the fancy parties. But there are lots of fun things happening around town. The NBA puts on a good product. But for Houstonians, this is going to mean that a lot of money moves into Houston. A lot of people in the restaurant industry, the hotels, the taxi cabs, the florists, event venues, on and on and on, will do good business. But it also means that the eyes of the world will be on Houston. And we want to make sure that everyone who comes has a really great time. as they do every time we host one of these big sporting events. The reason that we keep getting them is that we have great facilities, but the big reason we keep getting them is that everyone who comes to Houston has a good experience, and that is a lot because of the citizens of Houston being welcoming, being helpful, being friendly, and being patient when streets get closed or restaurants get crowded.
We hosted it back in '06. Do you think that had
the fact that we did a great job in '06, and that's why they're back here, and that's why we're in the running for things like an upcoming Super Bowl. Every time we've done this, we have shown as a city, so we're going to keep trying to do it. I got to run to the airport.
Right to the airport, man.
Sorry.